Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to the Orangebloods Texas football channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, Jason Suchomel, Alex Dunlap, Anwar Richardson joining me today for another Orangebloods Modcast. Do us a solid. Like the video if we entertain you, make you laugh. You know what? Even if we don't like the video, subscribe to the channel. Get the notifications of when we release videos by ringing the bell. Fellas, we're a little like 50 hours, 49 hours and some change away from Texas and Baylor, a game that I think absolutely has become critical in the landscape of what this season is going to become. I'll just go around the room. Jason, I'll start with you. Your vibe, I think I know you and I were having a conversation about this yesterday, and maybe that's what we'll talk about right now. But as this game approaches, where's your head? Where's your heart? Where do you think things stand?
I just posted a matchups on Orange Bloods probably an hour ago, so people can take a look at those and probably get a pretty good indicator of what I'm thinking. I think it's going to be a close game, critical game for both programs, especially for Texas. If Texas wants to stay alive in the Big 12 championship race, that window kind of opened up a little bit last week. This is a must-win game for Texas. They're going on the road. I get it. It's an hour and a half long drive up to Waco, so it's still a road trip. We haven't seen this Texas team play exceptionally well on the road, not consistently. I mean, you can take the first half of the Oklahoma game if you want to call that a road game. So, I've got a lot of question marks. I mean, this is a very sound Baylor team. The more I broke it down, I didn't see a lot of weaknesses. But then I look at this Texas team and I say, hey, when Texas is hot, when it's firing on all cylinders, it's maybe, I would say even probably, I think the best team in the Big 12. But we've seen it fire on all cylinders, and then we've seen in the same game where the wheels just have fallen off. So I don't know what to expect. I think it's going to be a close game. We'll save predictions for our predictions podcast or modcast. But I think it's going to be a close game. I think Texas is going to have to play well to win this game. And this is a make or break game in a lot of ways for Texas if they want to get back in the Big 12 championship game.
Alex, I know that you have a burning desire, like your love for the Baptist 100 miles south of Austin is historically well known.
North. I don't want to get any San Antonio Baptist pissed off at me for no reason.
I'm all turned around in the woodlands. I know that you haven't watched a lot of Baylor probably because you mostly are watching afterwards and not ahead. Mm-hmm. Your vibe on this one?
Well, I mean, I'll have my predictions in the predictions, but I mean, I don't feel supremely confident on the Texas side for this one. I haven't read Jason's matchups column yet, but just looking a little bit at Baylor and looking at some of their best players and stuff, I feel like there's some matchups that they could really exploit. And then I feel like Coach Sarkeesian at his press conference this week did a really good job about just selling what it is that Aranda does and, the kind of defense that he plays and the way that he can react to you, and how one of his best attributes is the fact that he can quickly adjust to whatever it is that you bring. So I think even if Texas brings a good game plan into this thing, it's going to be a dogfight where they have to continue to adapt throughout the course of the game. Can the team hold up? And I talked about it in my column yesterday, my chat column, sort of a Q&A, just about something that's been creeping up in my mind that somebody asked about. Is just strength and conditioning. Is this a strength and conditioning issue? Is this a mental issue? What has been happening in the second halves of these football games? If we're looking at a football game where, it's against a fundamentally sound team and we're depending on the coaching staff having to continually adapt to be able to put these players in the positions they need to win the game. It's just like, it feels like a lot of pieces need to come together, just like they do in any football game, just like they do in any football game. And maybe it's good for Texas fans that I feel a little bit goosey about this one, because I didn't feel this goosey about OU and Oklahoma State, and I was wrong about both of those. So,
Anwar, I've got like some follow-up questions that I want to kind of pepper people with, but I want to ask you the same thing. You and I have done videos this week. Where's your head?
My head and the hard part for me, Ketch, is when you're this many games into the season, and after Baylor will actually be 3/4 through the season, teams usually are who they are. I mean, it's hard to do a whole lot of fixing and overhauling and making yourself dramatically different when you literally are just about 3/4 through the season. So, I'm not expecting all of a sudden they had a bye week and somehow they were able to fix the problems that plagued them in the second half. I think for the most part, this is who they are. This is who this team is. And I think it's up to Sarkeesian to get the best out of, what he has and what he's operating with. But, it's the next 2 weeks would be a big game because, look, if they lose this one, Ketch, then Iowa State's just Iowa State. Like no one,
it'll be hard for them, I think, to come back.
Yeah.
Against Iowa. That would almost have blinking lights of trouble if if it's a 3-game losing streak and you basically go over in October. There's a lot on the line.
Yeah, it's huge, for Sarkeesian for year one. Maybe not for 2022 recruiting, but for 2023 recruiting, obviously we'll hit a point where guys start taking that wait and see approach because they want to see it on the field. And Jason has written that story a billion times. You just got to cut and paste everything you've written over the last few years. So
just win games, Anwar.
they just win games. Guys just want to see them win games.
The rest will take care of itself.
Yeah. We've been cut and pasting that story. Just interchange the athletes, and no one will actually know, Jason.
We can all go on vacation for like 3 weeks straight. We just rerun all of the articles and change the names, and we've got content sorted over the course of we can just take December off, and if there's a portal thing that goes down, we jump on. But otherwise, the content kind of writes itself. Alex, the point that you were hitting on, I want to go back to the press conference on Monday for a little bit, right? Because, when Anwar and I did our Monday overreaction show here on the channel, which if you guys haven't seen that video, go check it out. Thanks to the guys over at Rogue Apothecary for sponsoring that. We talked about how, this week turned into psychobabble week, right? Like there's once a week during this last decade plus, it turns into what's going on behind the scenes to change the mindset and how do you finish. And there's all of this brain stuff that the media tries to dig into to figure out how it's going to be solved. And then, like Anwar likes to joke, the next week after that'll be, let's get our seniors eligible for a bowl, right? There are these themes that get hit on. But weirdly, against Baylor, all of the components from Monday's press conference will be things that go into the game plan, right? Finishing, stopping the run, not getting lost on offense in the second half. This is one of these games where immediately they can't just slowly work on these things. These things have to be better. All of the things that were talked about, or Texas, I think, puts itself in a very precarious situation.
Well, and the question is, Ketch, is it mental or is it physical? Is it strength and conditioning? I mean, you can't fix that in a week. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know if you can fix this psychology stuff in a week. I mean, I wrote is maybe this is something, I think you would hope it's something psychological, right? Because that's something that's fleeting. It's something that's abstract. It's something that, it doesn't represent something that's systemic as far as what you're doing as a program, right? It's something that's, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but it would seem like if it was something like that, you could get figured out. I mean, I don't know what they said. They watched a movie or what was that? I mean,
you're trying to do anything at that point.
Yeah, man. And and here's the good thing, I guess, if you're a Texas fan, it's Sarkeesian. Sarkeesian seems to really like that side of stuff. I don't know why. I wouldn't like it in any kind of leadership role. You guys know I'm terrible as far as interpersonal communications or really understanding psychologically what other people's motivations are or what it is that, they're trying to communicate to me. So I would be horrible in a role where I'm trying to figure out the psychology of other people and fix it, but Sark seems to like that. He's talked openly, about the fact that these are things that he's had to deal with at other schools and he's had success with. So we'll just see, man. But this team for 2 weeks has collapsed. I mean, they've collapsed, and I feel like there has to be an answer there somewhere. I don't know what the answer is. I think that the best hope for Texas fans is maybe Sark has his finger on it, understands it, and has put this these skills and these attributes that he says that he's come to throughout his coaching career to good use over the bye week. The bye week certainly came at a great time.
So, Jason, I'm going to ask everybody this next question, but I'm going to go to you first. So it puts you a little bit in the spot. But the strength and conditioning component of the program was mentioned earlier in the show. I think Alex brought it up, right? Is there a strength and conditioning problem? It's the kind of thing that's slowly being talked about, right? Like you're starting to see it pop up more. That's not really my question. My question is, it feels like with every new coach, the strength and conditioning guy is the most talked about hire, right? I mean,
celebrated at first, right?
Pat Moore and Yancey, and it was always a big deal under Mac. And it's a bit strange that under Sarkeesian, I don't think most of the people on the board would even know Becton's name. Like, I think he's so obscure at this point from a profile standpoint that I think even a lot of the diehards on the board would go, wait a minute, what is the, because we just haven't talked about him and the strength and conditioning program a lot. Are we on the verge of that changing? Like what, I guess just the question is, what do you make of the strength and conditioning program, which all of us have limited knowledge of to some degree, but how much does it cross your mind when you watch these games? Like, is there a strength and conditioning program? And oh, by the way, why isn't there more hype behind the strength and conditioning coach? Because you and we've all never seen it like that. That guy's always supposed to be a rock star, and it doesn't feel like he's talked about in that capacity.
First off, I don't know who you're questioning their knowledge of strength and conditioning shows. I'll show the gun.
Oh no! He took us to the gun show.
Secondly, it's funny when every time a strength and conditioning coach is hired. I mean, going back to, was it Benny Weiler that replaced Mad Dog? I think.
Yeah.
The ones under Charlie and Tom Herman. They're so celebrated at first, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's amazing!" and he makes you want to run through a brick wall.
And Pat Moore had the pit.
The pit for Pat Moore, yes, and just never saw him smile, and he just like beat the shit out of you through a picture. You didn't hear a lot with Torrey Becton when he was hired, but I don't know why. That's a good. I haven't really thought of that until you just brought it up. I don't know if because he's on social media and now you have video clips that they're showing. You almost get to see him more than you. Maybe that's why we don't talk about him as much. Maybe the other guys were more behind the scenes, where Torrey Becton, we get to see him on Twitter clips and things of that nature. But, I don't know. I mean, those guys are always so ballyhooed when they're first hired. And then as soon as the team starts to lose a couple games, they're the first guys that get called out. But especially in this situation, they're not closing games in the fourth quarter. And I sent y'all a message on Slack earlier this week. A friend of mine sent me a message that he blah, 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 third hand down the chain, but from a former NFL strength and conditioning guy who was, I think, at Texas way back when, who said, hey, they need to do things differently with their offensive and defensive lines. Like, this is what he's recognizing. So, maybe there's some truth to that. I mean, Torrey Becton is big on flexibility and speed and explosiveness, and all that stuff is critical in football. It's certainly critical on a Steve Sarkisian team, but maybe there is some truth to needing maybe some different techniques for the guys along the line. I don't know. I mean, if they go out and beat Baylor by 21 this week, nobody cares. We're not talking about that anymore. So, I don't think that's the big issue. I just think in terms of why Texas has not played well in the second half, I don't look at it and just say, oh, they're physically worn down. I do think, like Sark has said, and Alex talked about, I mean, to me, it's more mental. Sometimes it just feels like they throw their hands up. I mean, against Arkansas too, it's like when things start going downhill, it just snowballs, and you can kind of see it coming from a distance. You're like, oh, this is not going to end well for Texas, and they just can't seem to correct that. Now, Sark this week, or during the off week, they did some motivational stuff. Anwar, you actually posted on the board the movie they watched, Free Solo. Yeah. And I'm not kidding. When you posted that, I watched the link to the preview. And I was like, that looks pretty damn cool. So I ended up watching Free Solo this week. Add that to the one list of the movies that I have watched. And Alex, to your point, I minored in psychology, believe it or not. So I minored in psychology. I watched Free Solo. I feel like the same damn person I was last week. So I don't I think it all comes down to having some success and building on that. Anwar said at the top of you kind of are who you are at this point. They've got to break that mold, and it's not going to be from watching a movie. They just got to go out and find success, dig down deep, and and turn in a 4-quarter performance, or better yet, you know what? Maybe be down to Baylor at half and flip the script, come back and win that game. Do that.
Statistics prove that's not good for Sarkeesian.
What's that?
The stats will show if a Sarkeesian team is trailing at halftime, that it usually doesn't end well.
Yeah, you're right, Anwar. But at some point, you got to flip the script, break the mold. I just think this team needs some confidence in the second half. I think it is more of a mental thing than a physical thing. To get back to your original question, Ketch, I don't think tricks and gimmicks and speeches and watching movies are going to necessarily do the trick. I just think they've got to find success on the field on a Saturday, and then maybe it starts snowballing the other direction.
But the thing is, though, Ketch, when you guys start talking about like Becton, there's a huge difference with Sarkeesian and maybe Tom. Tom would show up at Big 12 Media Days and read off a list of the accomplishments that they did in the offseason, right?
Oh, yeah.
We'd have
like we put on a total of 180 pounds of lean muscle mass, and we put on it's crazy stuff.
Yeah,
right?
he would literally go down the list and say, this is what Yancey McKnight did with my guys during the summer. So he routinely, every single chance he got, would tell you, hey, this is the gains that we made in the summer. This is what we did as a collective group, as individuals, all that type of stuff. Sarkeesian's not like that. Sarkeesian doesn't talk up his anyone on his staff, to be quite honest with you. You don't hear him mention his staff members. You don't hear him mention, hey, me and Pete K sat down and we discussed this and that. He doesn't talk up his staff at all. And that's just so when it comes to Becton, I think it just follows in line that because he doesn't let his offensive coordinator speak, doesn't let his defensive coordinator speak. We were able to speak to his assistants one time, and that's going to be it. He wants to be the only voice. He wants to be the only person that people focus on. He adapts that from Nick Saban, which, by the way, is great when you win. People want to hear from you all the time when you win, right? And people want to hear from Nick. And people always want to adapt what Nick Saban does. All these coaches want to do what Nick Saban does. It's great when you're doing 10 plus wins a year and competing for the national title. It's a little bit trickier when you're not doing that, because at some point people get tired of hearing from you, and sometimes it would benefit from hearing from others. So I think as relates to Becton, the reason we don't know much about him is because he doesn't talk up any of his assistants. And so therefore it's hard to know what, the intricacies of things that are being done behind the scenes as relates to. I just wanted to throw that out there.
It's an interesting point, Anwar. And I would also add to this, in previous renditions of this, the strength and conditioning guy is always like the head coach's best friend. They know where all the bodies are buried. They're usually coming with them from someplace else. So Yancey comes from Houston with Tom Herman, and Pat Moore comes from Louisville with Charlie Strong. And if you go way back to the beginning with Mac Brown, Mad Dog Madden comes to Texas from North Carolina, and Becton's not that guy for Sarkeesian that I'm aware of, right? He wasn't with Sarkeesian. He was hired as a really good hire with a really good reputation, and a guy that was seen as an up and comer in the field. He was kind of destined, I think, kind of talked about that way, to take over a major strength and conditioning program. But it's not like he's the right-hand man historically for Sarkeesian. And that may play a small role in this as well, in that I think those other head coaches were conditioned to kind of hype up. They were the hype guys for their strength and conditioning coordinators, in part because those dudes are their boys, lifers. And I don't know that Sarkeesian has a strength and conditioning lifer, which, may mean nothing at all, other than when we talk about why we haven't heard a lot about Becton. I think Anwar explained a big portion of why that is, but the relationship between head coach and strength and conditioning, probably a little different between those two, just because they didn't arrive together the way those other guys did.
And I don't know how that could have happened, because Sark, say what you will about his path as a head coach or his path. I mean, his path as a coach coming into this head coaching job has been fragmented. It's like, what is he going to bring the guy from USC that he had, or hadn't worked with him in 5 years? Like, he's not going to bring the guy from the Falcons. Like, obviously you're not going to, you're not going to bring I forget the guy's name. That dude who just screams and screams at Alabama Pro Day.
Well, they had like 2 people at Alabama.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to rip that dude away from Saban. So I just, it would have been hard. He came with different circumstances. He didn't have a program rolling as a head coach the same way that Charlie Strong did at Louisville, the same way that Herman did at U of H. So I could certainly see what you mean about the dynamic being so different.
So do we think that matters at all?
I don't know. Like I said in my Q&A yesterday. I mean, I'm concerned by it, but I'm not necessarily concerned. It's good. I guess it's a good point that you brought up. That's a point that I hadn't really considered. So I don't really know exactly how I feel about that. The only thing I know is it feels like there's evidence that could point to the fact that there might be a strength and conditioning issue if this isn't a mental issue. And so if we're digging down on reasons why that issue could exist, or why it just hasn't gotten as much play, or why Sark doesn't talk about him as much, I think that your theory is as good as any that I could think of.
I don't think it really matters, Ketch. I mean, yes, the relationship's different. I mean, those guys that we've mentioned previously were the head coach's right-hand man. Like you said, they knew where the bodies were buried. They were kind of the quiet muscle man, if you will, for the program. I don't think you have to have that. I don't see why you have to have that kind of relationship, as long as you're confident. I mean, listen, Tom Herman wasn't watching over Yancey McKnight's every move. Those coaches probably more than any have complete independence in what they're doing, right? So as long as you have confidence, if Sark has confidence in what Torrey Becton's doing, and I think clearly he does, I don't think it's an issue. Maybe they have a different relationship that we've seen from these other strength and conditioning coaches at Texas. It just comes down to, performance. It comes down to obviously putting it in play on the field. And, we can go back and forth till the sun goes down on whether or not it's a mental issue. Is it a physical conditioning issue? Is it a strength issue? Is it a combination of all? Usually the truth's in the middle. It's probably a combination of all of it. But personally, I don't think that's a detriment if Sark has a different kind of, or maybe I don't say a more distant, more hands-off relationship with a strength and conditioning coach. I'm sure, listen, Torrey Becton still reports to Sark. He still tells him which guys are doing well and who's not, and the assistants. I'm sure the communication's just fine there, but it is a different type of relationship. I don't view that as a negative at all.
Anwar, this is quite a damning thing to say. I won't even say this about Texas necessarily. So I'm not saying that Texas has this, but I'm going to bring it up because they might. How does a team have a weak chin? Right. So I feel like the scouting report, Mike Gundy's scouting report was keep the game close. We talked about it in our post-game show and in videos afterwards. Take it into the second half. We'll take them into the deep waters. We'll drown them. And it worked. I mean, it felt like Texas was one play away from blowing that game out. And then it just stayed close. And then it got into the second half, and the coaches struggled and the players struggled and nothing kind of worked. And in the fourth quarter, suddenly a run defense that had been good all day long just starts getting gashed. And Gundy's over there just kind of doing his thing. Like, yeah, this is just how I had it drawn up. It is a game plan that I could see Baylor trying to use this weekend. So how does that happen? We've seen 2 straight games where Texas goes into the fourth quarter, and as Alex called it, right, they just collapsed. What causes that? Because it feels like the kind of thing that's why Tom Herman was like making the team play games and ping pong and giving them runny eggs. They do all of this so that at the end of games, the opposite occurs. So when it doesn't, I mean, I know we're all just guessing, but it's a hell of a thing to even suggest about a team that, just make them play till the fourth quarter and then it's over with. I don't even know what to think about that necessarily.
Ketch, it really boils down to the elephant in the room that I think we've all have heard about for years. I know you guys have heard this, but there has been this reputation that Texas players are mentally soft. You know, when Charlie Strong came in here, what was his thing? His theme was, these guys are soft. I've got to find a way to toughen these guys up because these are the Mac Brown guys, right? And so this is just a soft program, and this is what it is. So then it was like, he's got to bring in Florida guys, right? Because Florida guys are going to be more tougher and more street and more everything than these Texas guys who are so soft. You remember, had the Florida Five and all these type of things, because Charlie needed to bring in some Charlie guys who were tough, right? And then we saw that didn't really happen. And then Tom Herman comes in. It's the same thing, man. Those Charlie guys are really soft. They're mentally soft. So from day one, it's sit the F up in a meeting, maybe crack the whip on everything. And then Tom Herman was that tough guy, that badass that Texas needed, because these Texas guys were soft, right? And everything for Tom Herman was about beating the softness out of them to get them to be mentally tougher. And now what we're hearing Sarkeesian say, unlike some of these other guys, Sarkeesian's really nice. Like, overall, Sarkeesian's a nice dude. He get prickly at times, but overall, he's a nice dude. And Sarkeesian's not the kind of guy that wants to throw guys under the bus. But what he's saying is, yeah, well, our psyche, I don't know what's going on with our psyche. What's that code for, right? I don't know what's going on with our mental. What's that code for, right? And then he starts talking, he's like, well, I've got to show him a motivational movie to get these guys to be a little bit tougher, to run through a brick. And it didn't work for Jason, right? But there becomes this thing, this common theme.
Your speech is inspiring me right now, though.
Each coach that's come in has somewhat questioned the mental toughness of the team that they have inherited. And that's a bigger picture thing. Like, that's to undress that's the Pulitzer Prize, right? Because you have some believe that, hey, you got athletes, once they get to Texas, they feel like they've arrived and they feel like I'm good. And there's a lack of toughness. There's a lack of dog. You hear all those things, but there's a theme. It's not just the past two games. If you really just go back for the past two coaches, it seems to be the same theme, and it seems to be kind of rearing its head here once again, which would show that there's a little bit more of a deeper institutional thing than meets the surface.
I have no idea.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine? I was just thinking about you talking about Herman. Could you imagine Steve Sarkisian taking his bare forehead and banging it up against one of his players that was wearing a helmet?
Or coming off a bus with a baseball bat, right? I mean, we could go through everything. I mean, running across to try to fight Mike Gundy, during a game. I mean, there was a lot of gifts that Tom provided in GIF and not GIFTS.
But you know what, Anwar? I'm trying to remember back to last season, and there was a closing out games issue, but there wasn't a collapse issue. Like, I don't remember last season it being about the guys aren't mentally tough, right? Because the thing that you'd say about Herman is that, and look, he got fired. So there's only so much you can say, but his team stopped getting their asses kicked. That's not what was happening to them at the end. In the games that they lost, you didn't walk away saying weak chinned. More times than not, it was like fluky, weird stuff. Like Keontae Ingram fumbles in the end zone, and they weren't winning all of the games. And the thought was, we need to hire a guy who elevates us from very good to better than that. I just don't like. It feels like Texas has the scary thing for me. Is it feels like this locker room has regressed in the areas that we're talking about. That this program was supposed to be, and look, it lost a lot of key players. Like maybe that's where Sam comes in, and a guy like Sam Cosme and a few others, where it was like they weren't going to let the team get beaten in a fist fight. They just might not execute. It feels like there are multiple things happening all at once right now. But one of the things is that when you use the word collapse, and it's kind of fair, this feels like a newer problem. So I don't know. I don't know how that happens, but I guess I'm saying, Anwar, I thought the program had at least passed this hurdle of they're mentally. I just don't remember at the end. That's what we thought of Herman's teams. They just didn't execute well enough.
Well, I'm sorry, Ketch.
No, go for it.
Well,
go for it.
I was going to say, I mean, but there's a juxtaposition to that I think we should probably at least highlight. I think whenever I say the word collapse, I never saw Herman's like run game operating at such a high level like we've seen with Bijan in the first half of these games and stuff like. So I think comparatively, when you take that away in the second half of these games, it feels more like a collapse because it was like I'm seeing something get going it seems like it's big time. It's something that's going to win this football game, right? I think that the defenses look good in the first half of some of these games. They've been getting turnovers. They've been forcing fumbles. They've been able to fabricate stuff. And then just in the second half, I mean, whether it was 26 for Oklahoma, or what was it, 24 for Oklahoma State, these running backs, like all of a sudden it's like the running backs for the other team, the defensive line and the linebackers just can't hold up against them in the second half of these games. And so it's like they get off to good starts. They get off to, I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's different than it is with Herman because, like you said, Ketch, it's like with Herman, it was like they just couldn't hang on, right? They couldn't hang on. Whereas with this, it feels like they can't get to that higher level that gets fans so excited to watch and see, and then sustain that level through the course of the game.
Well, the thing is that we did see last season, Ketch specifically, was that we saw a team that didn't give up. We saw a team that would come back in the fourth quarter. We saw that against Texas Tech, where mathematically that's a team, they should not have won that game, but they still found a way to come back. There was still no quit in them, or even the Oklahoma State game. When you look at that and you're like, ooh, this game is just about over. And they found a way to come back and win that game. So to your point, but Sark, was hired to win, the TCU kind of games, the Iowa State kind of games, to get you through those kind of things. But from a mental standpoint, you didn't see it as much last year. We definitely didn't see a blowout for sure. Like those things were somewhat things of the past. So there is some, to your point, Ketch, there is a little bit of regression so far that we'll see if they get it right. But there, to your point, there have been a little things where you look at and you go, take a mental note, because that's a little alarming.
I mean, Jason, we weren't saying before the season, Sarkeesian has to make these guys tougher. It wasn't, we did do that with Charlie Strong and with Tom Herman, that their first seasons were all about like needing to transform the program. One of the tricky things about Sark coming in is Herman didn't leave the program destitute. It just left it short of being a championship kind of a team. It was pretty good, as opposed to, and consequently, that was kind of what Charlie took over from Mac, was in theory, a pretty good team that just needs to be able to get to the next step. I don't know. Like, I'm not blaming anybody. Like, I literally don't know whose fault it would be, or even how it happens, other than there's a change of personnel. So every year you're not dealing with the same exact group of guys as the previous year. But man, we did a lot of videos and wrote a lot of columns all off season long. None of them ever said Sarkeesian has to completely revamp, like, to the psyche of the program. Again, I don't know who to blame. I'm just noting that we're suddenly in a position where this stuff is kind of being talked about. And look, maybe it's because Sarkeesian was so open about it, right? Like, I think Alex mentioned, he does like to talk about this. This is kind of up his alley. And maybe another coach would just not get into it, and it wouldn't seem like maybe such a thing. I don't know. I'm just, I did not think when this season started that we would be into the 8th game of the season, and this is where the narrative would exist. And I thought this was a 9-3 team. So the record's not too far away from where I thought it would be. I just didn't think the makeup of that record would be this.
Listen, I get it. They've lost 3 games. They lost 2 in a row, come from behind victories for the opponent. If that Hail Mary that Oklahoma completes doesn't hit, Texas probably wins that game. We're not having this conversation. I mean, Steve Sarkeesian's a West Coast guy. I don't think, were his teams at USC, even under Pete Carroll, were they tough teams? No, they were teams that out-executed and out-athleted the opponent, had better skill position players. They were good in the trenches too. Don't get me wrong. You can't deny that. But, Sark wasn't brought in like Charlie Strong was, like Tom Herman was, to toughen up this program. He was brought in, hey, do what you do. Bring in great athletes, out scheme, out execute, out game plan, out adjust your opponent. We're seeing him start to do that with guys like Xavier Worthy and Casey Thompson at times, and Bijan he didn't bring in, of course. But they've got those kind of athletes. They just need to continue to build on it and finalize it. I think the being tough thing is a little overblown. I don't think this is a soft team.
They've been outscored 41-7 in the fourth quarter of the last 2 games.
I don't think that's for a lack of being tough necessarily. I say that, and then I say, hey, they kind of threw the towel in against Arkansas. But I think there's some truth to a lot of this. We could talk about this all day. I think there's some truth to what I think Anwar mentioned, that I think Texas football players, when they come in, they've been coddled all through high school. They have these wonderful facilities and wonderful strength and conditioning rooms. They don't have the junkyard dog mentality that maybe a player from Georgia or Alabama has, or Louisiana has. But
Headline: Jason hates at Texas athletes.
Oh, that's not it. But I just we've always talked about, hey, are they maxed out when they get to college? A lot of them, and they haven't experienced a lot of adversity. A lot of them, and they have personalized coaches and personal strength and conditioning coaches and trainers, and these $1 million facilities that they train in high school. But we weren't complaining, or nobody in Southern California was complaining about USC being untough when Sark was their offensive coordinator. No, man, they just had tremendous talent. You don't have to be a tough team. You don't have to be a Kirby Smart coach team to be a great team. That's not Sark's MO. I mean, yes, he's going to want his players to be tough, obviously, but I think you just got to let Sark build the kind of team, the kind of program that he needs and that he's been successful with before. And if that's not the tough team that's going to, pound you and lean on you for 4 quarters, so be it. I mean, let the flash and the excitement and the high octane, high scoring offense do its thing. They just got to be more consistent in that area. And a lot of that, frankly, is on Steve Sarkisian. I mean, the fact that these offenses have completely stalled in the second half of the last couple of games, that Oklahoma State game was a disaster. I think they had no first downs, I think, after that first drive of the second half. Listen, you can fault the players, you can fault the offensive line, you can fault the running game was putting them in bad down and distances. That's Steve Sarkisian's job to overcome those obstacles. So I don't think it's a toughness thing as much as it is just an out-executed thing.
For the record,
I think toughness. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ketch.
No, I was going to say, I think for the record, there were 4 listens in that little thing. So, Jason's getting serious.
Yep. Rando's notching them off as we go through them. So, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anwar.
I think the toughness part, Jason, doesn't necessarily, the mental toughness doesn't always necessarily equate to just being like a junkyard dog. It means that if something bad happens, there's not that woe is me, here we go again kind of mentality that, we know sometimes happens. It's being able to communicate with other guys, being able to stay in your gaps and trust your training and understand that it can't just be, well, we got to play it for all 4 quarters. I think Ketch brought out something that has kind of stuck with me, something he said earlier in the week when he started talking about, fourth quarters and important to play in 4 quarters, and how guys are saying, yeah, we got to finish strong in the fourth quarter. And Ketch is like, well, what does every player from youth league to high school to college do when the fourth quarter is about to begin. They all put up the 4 because they understand the importance of playing in the fourth quarter. So to say like, man, we've got to play tougher in the fourth quarter. We didn't realize that. Well, why were you putting this up at the beginning of the fourth quarter? You didn't realize how important that was. That's the theme. No one does this. No one does that. You haven't seen people come out of halftime but like, got to do the third quarter, baby. Third quarter is where it's at. Everything's about the fourth quarter. So the concern really becomes when they're saying, man, yeah, we just got to play tougher in the fourth quarter. Shit, you didn't know that? Okay, well, now you know. I get it. Okay, good, cool.
Maybe it's so cliche now, Anwar, the fourth quarter thing, that they really, they don't even know what that means. They just know that it's a tradition that
do it out of habit now. Yeah.
It's like standing in the 7th inning stretch of baseball games. Like you don't remember how you learned it necessarily, but you just did it enough times. 7th inning comes around, you stand up.
It'd be interesting how many people know it comes from the U and how many people just think that they've been doing it since they were kids and Pop Warner.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, and then I want to just one final thought on all of this, and then I wanted to ask one last set of questions and then go into parting shots. It's funny. The coaches, Anwar, every head coach that's come through here, not including Sark, specifically speaking of kind of Tom and Charlie, it's like, we got to get dogs. We got to get guys that'll come in here and be dog. Maybe the coaches psychologically are looking and pushing the wrong things. Maybe it's about in 2021, kids don't operate like that anymore. Maybe you need like a Dr. Sharon. I know not all of you have seen Ted Lasso, but maybe there's a different psychological approach that maybe it's not pushing these guys with runny eggs and treating them like crap because you want them to act like dogs that have been locked outside trying to get a meal. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's not it. Maybe that used to be the way football was done. I don't know. I'm just saying that it's funny. Every coach comes in here saying they need kind of the same thing. I need tougher kids. And it's like, well, these kids aren't changing. You know what I mean? Like the cycles of kids that come in, they're all kind of wired the same way. And so maybe a different approach is needed. I say that as someone who doesn't even have completely an idea of what the approach would be. I think sometimes it's easier to spot the thing that's not working, much easier than it is to point out something that might actually work.
The challenge is, though, just real quick on that, Ketch, is that Sarkeesian kind of did take a different approach. He didn't come in MFing guys. He didn't come in saying sit the F up, and he came in with more of an NFL kind of respectful approach. And Texas sits at 4-3. So the hard-nosed MFer guy is like, see, Sarkeesian's got to be a lot tougher. And then, the philosophical person is like, no, just got to talk to them a little bit more.
Does that mean next offseason we're going to get angry Sark?
Yeah,
the whole offseason about how he broke bad, shows up at the meetings, cursing, pounding tables.
Yeah.
All right. So real quick.
Maybe if he double flicks the bird on signing day, maybe we'll know he's serious.
Oh man, the articles are already writing themselves, Anwar. You'll write that article that you swore you'd never write again, and you'll be like, "Here it is, the off season, the double finger salute." All right, I thought about this. So here's how I want to end this part of the thing before we go into parting shots. It's a 2-part question. In a word. Everybody give a word that they think describes the Texas defense. Jason, I'll start with you.
Ooh, one word.
One word.
Oh man, that's tough. You put on the spot like that. I would say confusing.
Okay.
Don't understand.
Alex, that's actually not a bad word, Jason, for the theme of what I'm going for.
Yeah, kind of the first thing that popped into my mind is kind of like confused. The first word that popped into my mind was enigmatic.
Okay, perfect.
Love it.
We got enigmatic and confusing.
Let me Google enigmatic.
Points for anyone who can spell it.
Anwar, keep yours to one syllable, please.
Mine's going to be simple and you can spell it. Disappointing.
Okay. Now, Anwar, I'll start with you and we'll just go reverse order on this. How many NFL guys do we think plays on this defense currently?
Let's see. I think
NFL guys, I'm sorry, but can we just clarify? Are we talking practice squad too?
Let's include practice squad. They're guys that will be paid by NFL teams for their services beyond this season.
Well, I mean, I know DeMarvion is probably an obvious guy. I think Anthony Cook could be a guy, so that would be 2 for me. I think Coburn probably goes as an undrafted guy. Maybe he can hit a practice squad, but I don't know. When it comes to defensive linemen, I mean, Taquan Graham got drafted, and I didn't anticipate that, so I might be wrong as far as defensive linemen is concerned. So he might be a guy. So that's number 3 for me. Deshaun Jameson probably gets drafted, and he's probably a special teams kind of guy. So I would say that's 4 off the defense for me so far. And then maybe futuristically, Alfred Collins lands on an NFL squad. So that would probably be 5 for me. Who was your question, Ketch?
Josh Thompson.
Josh Thompson, probably late round pick, maybe undrafted. So that would be probably 6, but at least a practice squad guy in year 1. I can see Josh Thompson. So I would say 6.
Alex, you going to add any more?
Yeah, I mean, I think just if we're looking at the Taquan Graham corollary, I think you got to at least mention Moro Ajomo, and then the only other guy that I agree with everything that Anwar said. The only other guys you would look at, I know that Texas fans are going to just jump off bridges when I say this, but look, I know of an agency that really wants to sign BJ Foster.
He's going to an NFL training camp.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
And then the only other one I would mention, kind of more looking ahead and stuff, but Tavondre Sweat's a really good player, and he gets the like. If you look at, I think PFF sucks at grading a lot of these guys and stuff, but if you believe in the PFF grades and stuff, like he grades out as one of the better players on the Texas defense, and I think that scouts will be into him. So those would be the dudes who I would add.
Jason,
by me, by the way.
Yeah, I don't have anybody to add. I think Sweat was a guy that was kind of on my mind, but those are guys that we're thinking maybe you're going to make it, or maybe they land on a practice squad. Other than DeMarvion, we're not talking about plus NFL players. I mean, maybe some of them blossom in the NFL. That can happen, of course. But I kind of think I know where you're going with this, Ketch. You're going to say why they have so many NFL guys.
My point would be that at any given time, this defense probably has a half dozen. I think in the secondary, I think almost everybody but the second safety will play on Sundays. I think Jameson plays on Sundays. I think it is not like the NFL is littered with awesome defensive backs. At Texas, typically, guys like Duke Thomas have played in the NFL for multiple seasons. Guys that were just okay players. I think Thompson, Jameson, Cook, Foster, Darian Dunn may go to an NFL training camp. Like, I wouldn't say he'll make a team, but like at any given time, this is not a defense void of the type of talent that on paper we think it needs to have. So how is it that Texas has the 8th best defense on paper in the Big 12 statistically, and is last in some key areas when they're not? It's not completely talent based, because they do have some NFL talent. They've got more NFL talent on the defense at any given time than I think the offense definitely does. And the offense, now to Jason's point, the offense has some high end potential NFL talent, but
to have 8 fringe NFL talent guys, or to have 3 top 2-round guys and maybe 5 guys that are, practice squad type players. I mean, you got to have some high end, top shelf talent. Texas just doesn't have that. I mean, DeMarvion's the closest thing they have, but I hate to say it, but you look down the road in College Station, they've got high end NFL talent, and that's why their defense is so much better than what we've seen Texas put on the field. I mean, I get it. They've got a bunch of pretty good to really good college players, but they just don't have those elite players that are
That's
different.
true. So Alex, as a guy who obsesses about the NFL, right? Like, is that in your mind? Is that really what this is about? It's about the continued discussion of not enough playmakers and war daddies.
I think so. I mean, I got so much shit early in the season because I was not as high on the Texas defensive line, and I would give the other team's offensive line. There's no Malcolm Brown on this defensive line for Texas. I mean, everybody points to Coburn. I mean, Keandre was a Rivals 250 player. I mean, this is not a defense littered with 5-star players or not even enough very high 4-star players. I mean, I don't know. Well, BJ Foster was a borderline 5-star, but I mean, he hasn't panned out the way people thought he would, but there just aren't enough high-end, top-of-the-line playmakers on this defense. They've got to get more game-changing talent before this defense is going to be, the kind of defenses we've seen way back when Texas had dominant units. Back when they were recruiting 5-star talent. Texas needs more of that.
Don't do it.
Anwar, how many 5-stars does it take to beat Baylor?
I'm done. I'm done. I heard Jason say it, and here we go again. I knew it. I knew we were going to be at this point soon enough. And here we go. We got bringing a bunch of 5 stars. Okay, Jason, got to bring in more 5 stars.
No, I'm just tired. And I've been saying this for years. Texas fan, and I think every fan base does this, overvalues the players. But I think Texas is worse than maybe any program in the country in overvaluing the individual talent. How many times have we seen preseason, oh, this guy's a high first-round pick. This guy's going to be top 10 draft pick. And then they're maybe going the 3rd round. I mean, listen, I hate to beat on Keandre Coburn. I mean, everybody acted like he was going to be a world beater before the season, and we've never seen that from Keandre Coburn. I mean,
he was good last year. He was good.
What would he have been drafted last year if he came out?
Well, he was a sophomore last year.
Okay, big deal. Okay, fast forward, if he was a junior last year, where would he have been drafted? How good was he, Alex?
He's about as good as Hassan Ridgeway.
Where's his
fifth round pick
in his senior year? So a 4th or 5th round pick, maybe, if he played like that as a junior.
It might be generous in my opinion, but
hey, Jason, it goes to your point though that Texas has a bunch of guys like that, right? I mean, I'm just saying, like, they've got 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round picks. I don't know that they have a single, although DeMarvion could be a guy that breaks into the top 100 for. It seems like he's got some buzz, not just us talking about him. But it's not a stacked roster in that regard, and even all of the DBs that I think have a chance to play on Sundays. I guess at the end of the day, though, I'm not even talking about why Texas isn't elite on defense. It's how with 6 NFL guys on the field at all times, you're not average on defense. And right now,
they should at least be average.
They're not average, and it's a weird fucking thing to try to figure out why this defense with a coaching staff, why they haven't been able to be average. I mean, Anwar, what was that stat? So Baylor and Texas are right next to each other in the run defense rankings. And Baylor's like 130 yards per game or something like that. And Texas is next in the rankings in the Big 12, but there's like a 60 yards per game gap between them and like the team ahead of them. And it's like, well, it's not this. 6 and 7 is actually not the same thing.
So rushing defense.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm making you do an internet search.
Yeah, this is horrible for
I'll tell you what, I'll look it up.
No, I got it. So Baylor is ranked 6, and they're giving up 134 yards per game is on the ground. Texas is ranked 8th, but they're giving up 201.
It's a big gap.
It's a huge gap between 6 and 8.
So, why can't they just be average is all I'm saying, because even on the defensive line, Collins, Coburn, and Sweat all project as guys of, you know what I mean? Like, it's just weird.
Should be better than they are for sure. Yeah, and I'm not arguing that point at all.
The sum of its parts don't add up to the parts, weirdly. All right, we got to do prediction video after this, so let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. We'll go into parting shots. Anybody want me to go first since I'm
Sure.
I feel like I know what Anwar's is about, what it better be about.
It won't be about the horrible trade offer you offered me yesterday. It won't be that. I got something a little bit better than that.
Well, I wanted to know about how the visit to San Antonio went. Because it was such a big life lesson that you had to teach your son.
Okay, I'll let you. Want me to go first?
You go first.
I got a couple, so they'll both be son related. Okay.
Okay.
So yes, my son plays basketball. Huge basketball fan. Everything like that. Huge LeBron fan. I don't want to hear it. Just is what it is. So, everyone, oh, why don't you tell them about Jordan? Okay, what if Jordan goes out and comes out of retirement and plays for my 8-year-old? Absolutely. But right now he knows Michael Jordan. He played basketball. And he loves the clothes. That's what he knows. So anyway, we were going to go to we went to San Antonio on Tuesday, bought tickets for him to go see the Lakers, 100 level. I mean, I just figured he'll have a chance to see LeBron. And then we start watching warm. He is hyped. I mean, he's getting there. He's dancing. He is so hyped. He's got his new LeBron number 6 jersey, all that, right? He is just ready for it. And we're watching warm-ups about 15 minutes beforehand. He's like, where's LeBron? I'm like, I don't know, maybe just back there getting worked on or something like that. And then time keeps going by. I keep thinking, where the hell is LeBron? This is taking a little bit of time here. And then, of course, because of technology, I go check Twitter just to make sure something bad didn't happen. And it shows that LeBron is out because he's got a ankle something or other. And I had to turn to him and say, son, LeBron's not playing today. He's hurt. And that excitement, that enthusiasm, that all that, it just sucked the life out of him. And he started to whimper a little bit. And it's okay. He's heard this and that. And I'm son, don't worry. Daddy's sad too. Do you know how much I spent on these tickets? I want to cry as well. This is hurting Dad too.
Your soul hurts.
It hurts me too, because we spent, between the tickets, spending a hotel, food out, everything like that. So it was a lot of money. But here's the great part. LeBron did come out. He did get a chance to see LeBron. And then eventually he was like, well, Dad, I got a chance to see him. And the Lakers won in overtime, ended up being a really great game. And it was a good learning lesson, for him. And then he was happy because he's like, well, at least they won. And it ended up being a really great experience. We had a ton of fun. And then the Lakers got blown out versus OKC last night. So then I felt really good. At least I got a chance to see a win. So it was a huge learning lesson. That wasn't my parting shot. I guess I'll say I got another parting shot, which I'll say for next week. Remind me how I have to call out my son's basketball coach. I'm not going to name him by name, but I'm going to give you a preview of what I'm going to say next week. That dude quit on the team before the final game, and I've got a lot to say about that, and that'll be next week.
Oh wow!
Oh, I got a lot to say. I'm not going to call him by name, but I got some shit ready for him.
Okay, well, you need to get that out now. We'll give you the space to do that.
Okay, so my son, he coached. There's this guy volunteer at the coach at the Pack, right over in Leander.
Yeah, that's right by my house. I'll go.
Yeah, right there. So, but like everything in Orangebloods, we all around each other. We just never hang with each other, right? We all just we're so close. So anyway, so I knew it was going to be a bad season from the first practice. And normally I coach my kid. I always coach my kid because I always feel like I'm not going to give him over to somebody else until I know they know more than me. But with the games are going to be on Sunday, and I wasn't quite sure when I'm going to be back from traveling. I didn't want to commit to something that I couldn't do. So I was like, I'll be an assistant. And I knew it was going to be a really bad season when from the first practice, which is 3rd and 4th graders, he tried to run motion offense and try to teach them motion offense, which if you know anything about 3rd graders, that might be the first thing to try to do, to try to teach them plays. And so man, they got to learn how to dribble, just simple stuff. So I knew it was all right, first game, I knew what's going to happen. We get blown out. Totally expect that to happen. And then we go a couple of games, get blown out again. So then all of a sudden, this coach decides not to show up for a practice, just doesn't show up, right? No advance warning, no anything. So then I take over the practice, and then eventually he's like, oh, he made up some excuse. Would never show up before a game for warm-ups, would always show. Then he started showing up late, right? So you could tell he wasn't interested. One time he shows up with his kid. He shows up like 10 minutes late. His kid doesn't even have a jersey. I'm just like, I don't even know what the hell's going on. So the last game of the season, which was Sunday, and again, we had one game, last game of the season, parents are emailing each other asking like, hey, what time is the game? Like some says 2, says 3, we're a little conflicted. The game's supposed to be, so he emails at 11 o'clock to say, hey, sorry for the confusion. The game's at 3 o'clock. I won't be there. Great coaching your kids. Good luck to you. Doesn't ask, can someone take over? Didn't contact me to see if I can do it. So then parents are starting to email, say, well, who's coaching our kids? Is anyone coaching? So this effort, he doesn't freaking reply. So I tell him, don't worry, I've got it. And went and coached them up. We got another win. Our best game of the season, by the way, our best game of the season, where parents were asking me, will you please do this next year? Because we really like you a lot. And I'm like, hell no. But I might. But
I can't decide if you're Phil Jackson or Brad McCoy.
I don't know.
You don't get that, but Jason does.
I don't know. But I can tell you, we ran that team off the court. My son, we scored 18. He had 6. He had about 12 steals and about 8 rebounds. So my little man was everywhere. We had a great game. So that actually is my party shot. The party shot really is this: if you're going to volunteer to be a youth coach, then go fulfill your obligation to the kids. Like, don't quit on the kids. I think that's the thing where I lost respect on them. Like, I know our team sucked, but losing is part of learning, and these were great learning lessons for the kids. And just to abandon them consistently and then quit on the final game, I just think I don't really have respect for a person like that. So if you're going to be a youth coach and this is going to be your first time doing it, just fulfill your obligations. That's all.
What's his first name?
I'm not going to do it.
Oh. Come on, Ron. Like, I'll just skip. Timmy.
Justin.
Oh, come on, Justin.
Do I know his last name? No, I won't do it. No, I don't want to do it. I don't want him to get pissed off.
Be better, Justin. Kiss those kids' ass. All right. Alex, follow that.
2 parting shots.
You know what, man? It's funny, but my son's his first flag football team. He's only 3, so it's like he's on the pre-kindergarten team, and he's by far the youngest. I mean, they're really, really bad. His coach, by the way, actually missed their last game too. I don't think it was anything. I think he had the other coaches there to fill in and stuff. It wasn't a complete abandonment.
It wasn't abandonment.
It was, I guess, on the last day you have like the Super Bowl, right, where the teams play and you don't know how long you're going to be there. I was really rooting for my son's team to make it to the next the next round or whatever, and they didn't get it done. The Cardinals, they ended up losing by a touchdown at the very end, and I was disappointed until I saw the new team come in, the Dolphins. And I look over and it's Jamal Charles holding this big like playbook, and he's got a bunch of good looking bigger kids and stuff. I'm like, Merritt, hey man, it's good that you just lost out on that one, man. I'm not sure how these backup coaches were going to do against JC and that big ass playbook he's got. Anyway, yeah, man. So got that going on. Got my daughter turning 7 today. Probably about to head out, and I don't know if my wife is going to have lunch with her, whether I need to, but I'll figure that out here shortly. And then just a quick update. Last week, I was asking about anybody out there that's got any hunting leases or any hunting land or places I could possibly go to go hunt or where I could just be provided access. Again, I'm a very responsible person, and I'll shut all the gates behind me and never leave any trash. One guy actually got back to me, man. It wasn't for a hunt this week. I didn't get to do it this week, but the dude's really cool, man. I'm get to go on a whitetail hunt in December. And I would just like to say, I mean, the opportunity is still open. I would love to come visit anybody else's land. you have axis deer, whitetail deer, anything like that, very, very, very into it. You can email me, alex@rosterwatch.com. You could DM me on Orange Bloods, or you can find me at Alex Dunlap NFL. Would love to meet you. Would love to see your land, and certainly very, very interested in any hunting access for the rest of the season.
I don't quite even know how to respond to the continued begging for
this is how you got to do it, Ketch. I've realized you have to leverage everything possible.
I'm not, again,
to get hunting permission.
There's no part of me that's telling me to tell you to stop, but it's funny to listen. You've got the approach down. It feels like you've made the approach before. It's like whenever I do the make sure you click the like button.
Yeah, it's kind of the same, right? It's
the same. Jason, you got a party shot?
Yeah, piggybacking off of Alex, I need a new big screen TV. Jason at orangebloods.com is the PayPal. Just send all your money there. Happy birthday, Alex, to your daughter. Enjoy those young years, man. My kids are past those years, so if I show up at my kids' school for their birthday, they're like, "Oh God, who's this guy?" So Anwar, sorry that game didn't work out, dude, but hopefully the next one will.
I'm not going to do it again. He wants to go again. I'm like, dude, we already dropped like 700. We're going to do this.
Oh, damn. Well, you know what? I was sitting at my daughter's gymnastics and I saw it come across on my ticker and I was like, oh man, LeBron's out. And I thought about you. You should seriously, there are some people in San Antonio. I know at least a couple Orange Bloods guys who are awesome guys who have season tickets. So next time Lakers are in town, float that out there. Hell, may even come down.
How about this? Anybody in the Cedar Park area who knows about the Austin Spurs and wants to get me floor seats for that is really feasible. How about Austin Spurs tickets? I'll be all chips in. That'll be my request.
Say, while we're asking for things, if anybody knows a good landscaper in the Woodlands, wants to hook me up with, my dog ate like something in the backyard yesterday. She's 15, and like she started like convulsing, and she must have put something in her mouth that was poisonous, and like our dog almost died from like she did this like weird thing. She rolled over onto her side, and her eyes were like rolling into the back of her head. And
what did she eat? Was it oleander?
I don't know, some purple thing. So now we got to get all the purple stuff out of the garden.
You don't need a landscaper, Ketch. You need a shovel, brother. Get out there and start digging. It's
manual labor, and B, something's got to replace it. So like I want to contribute to local businesses in my area. Hey, my final parting shot though, really, Texas, if you want to get Arch Manning, don't go 4-4. That's it. Like very quietly, we're reaching a point where Texas as a program's just not on the level of what his other considerations will be. I think we're at a point now where Texas has got to look like a program going someplace. It'll be asking a lot of Arch Manning if Texas finishes this season 7-5 to be like, no, I'll pass up Georgia because I love Sark. Like I win some games, Texas. If you really want to get Arch Manning and other 5 stars, not just in this class in 2023 and beyond, we got to stop having podcasts like the ones that we just had. So for myself, Jason Suchomel, Alex Dunlap, Anwar Richardson, again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and get notifications. We'll do it again next week. Thanks for watching. Later.